Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful fall day. My name is Robin Stafford, and I work with UVA clubs, including the UVA Club of Charlottesville. We are so pleased to welcome Leslie Harris back. Hi, Leslie.
Hello. Hello.
And hard to believe it's been 6 months since her spring program. Gardening has been so important for people with more time at home, and we've also seen a lot of people begin to garden for the first time. Though we may focus more on the spring, gardening is still fun in the fall and into the winter. And Leslie will share some of her tips for gardening this time of year with us. We'll start the program today by watching a pre-recorded segment from Leslie's garden, and then we'll follow it up with Q&A. So enjoy the program, and we'll see you back here shortly.
Hey, it's Leslie Harris, and welcome back to my garden. We're going to talk about some fall gardening things. You might remember me from spring if you watched that one. I am class of 83, and the guy filming this, Jeff Harris, is class of 81. And this is Virginia, and our kids all went to Virginia, and so we're all about Virginia. Wahoo. So my first topic, I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of fall topics, I think 6 of them, and the first one is bulbs. Bulbs. She doesn't care about bulbs. So I love to plant bulbs, throw them all around, get a big shipment much later in the year, like November, because I like to plant mine back when I'm thinking that the squirrels and the chipmunks maybe don't have as much time to find them. And I always plant my ones that they like crocuses and daffodils, with really hot pepper. And then I cross my fingers. This is a tulip, Queen of the Night, that really late dark one, which I think is going to look good in my garden next year. So I went and picked up a few of these just for this demonstration. 2 different ways to plant bulbs. The one at a time formal look. You dig your hole, and this is a great tool for it because that's 6 inches, and that's about how deep you want to plant it. The bigger the bulb, the deeper you have to go. Generally about 2 to 3 times the size of the bulb is how deep you want to go. So allium bulbs, you have to go quite deep, and crocuses are easy. So the one at a time planting makes for a formal look, which can be beautiful, but here's a really easy way to do it. Ginny, you gonna help me on this? So I got my shovel, I put my foot in, I lift my soil up, I dump my bag, and I say, bye-bye now, good luck to you, and we will see you next spring. And you're saying, that is a crazy lady, what about the ones that went in backwards and sideways? And I say to you that they will find their way, because they always do. They make their way up. And some of them might come up a little faster or slower, depending on how they landed in that hole. I didn't do my pepper, but I would for, in general. This is just for you guys. So I wanted to tell you about 3 bulbs that you might not plant all the time. And I also wanted to remind you that just like seeds last year during lockdown, bulbs are going fast. So if you haven't ordered some, get on it. How about some different things besides daffodils and tulips? And 3 ideas are my favorites. The allium, which you probably have seen before. That's that huge purple ball that rises above your spring garden. Comes in really late, like April around here in Virginia. Purple can be white also. Those are so good. And then I like to use 2 others that you may or may not have heard of. One's called leucojum, and the common name for that is either summer snowflake or giant snowflake. It's a flaky common name. Leucojum is probably what you should ask for. It's white, about 14 inches tall, and if you plant it with Camassia, the next one I want to talk about, which is blue, I mean, what's better than blue and white? And so they can take some shade, they will bloom very nicely in sun, and they are later than most of your spring bulbs. An amazing combination, and also possibly a distraction from the foliage that is wilting away from your early bulbs. And don't forget that you want to let that die naturally. Don't be one of those people that curls it up. The phloem, which is the vascular tissue that brings the energy from the sun back down to the root, does not want to detour. So just let it die naturally, and plant other pretty things to distract your eye, because it's not so pretty. All right, that was our first topic. Let's talk about other things now. So what we're going to do now is talk about garden cleanup for fall. And I am actually going to clean this whole bed. Ready? All done. Okay, first of all, I'm filming a couple of weeks before you're watching this. And secondly, I actually don't do a lot of fall cleanup in some parts of my garden. In the front, I like it to be neat. You will see in midwinter that beautiful, just smooth layer of mulch and everything that was an herbaceous perennial is chopped down, and we just have the evergreens for form and shape. And that's a great look, and I recommend that if that's what makes you happy. But if you are a person who, first of all, doesn't love doing fall cleanup in your border, keep in mind that by not taking things away, you are leaving lots of great habitat for insects, which then would feed the birds, and it just makes for a nice ecological circle in your garden. So clean up if you want to, and what should you clean up? Take away anything that's brown or down. That's going to make your garden look better. If it's kind of a golden, lovely thing that's sort of hanging around, leave it. But if it's, okay, so this hosta leaf might drive some people crazy. I think it's kind of pretty, but you got to do you because it's your garden. What I do over the winter is I let the leaves fall down, and I garden in winter as low as 40 degrees, and I'm a baby about the cold. I can get out there and stay warm enough. So I take the leaves off the beds, and then I mow them to munch them down to make them smaller, and put them back on the beds as mulch. So I'd love to do that in winter, and then by spring it does look pretty neat and things start to come up through. Okay, that's all about fall cleanup. So this topic is what looks good in the garden now, and we're so lucky in Virginia because the things that look good all summer may look good now. I've had some petunias that have pooped out, but this is my favorite type, and that still looks good. That type is called Bordeaux. I think it's the only type of petunia that I could actually name because I like it so much. The other ones are just pink or white. Come on down and see some of the other things that are growing. You know, most of your perennials that were good all summer, like salvias. This is the Guaranitica. Great for pollination, and it's going to go until first frost. Here's one that doesn't shine until fall, and it's an aster, and it's a particularly tall type. Back in the back where I have it, it's got boggier soil, and it's taller than I am, I think. This is the Aster tartaricus. It's the cultivar name is Jindai. That's Jindai. I recommend it highly. It is, I don't know if you can see this, but it's covered with pollinators. And come on down here and see my Honoringia there. Japanese anemone. So this is a great plant, and it has its moment right now. Starts in August, and I just love it. I probably could have staked it a little better, but look how tall and cheerful it is. It'll just keep coming. Even little balls that haven't, it's like a peony, even little balls that haven't bloomed are full of promise. Some other good things in my garden is a deep dark blue aster, and I wish I could name it, but if you're a good gardener, maybe you could. And of course, the quintessential fall plant that I love so much. I know it's common and everybody grows it, but I still love it, and it's autumn joy sedum. It has a very funky botanical name that I can never remember, and you don't want to hear it anyway, but it just looks so cute all year. It looks like this gorgeous you know, sedum, the succulent coming up in spring, and then it looks kind of like broccoli, and then it looks like kind of pink broccoli, and then it does this in fall. So good. All right, that's enough for fall flowers. You probably have some great ones growing in your garden. So let's talk about dividing perennials, which is another way of saying shopping in your own backyard for plants that you like. Which ones should you divide? The ones that you like. Some perennials will show you that they need to be divided if they start to die out in the middle. In that case, if you want to dig those up and spread them around your yard or share them with friends, that's best for the plant. Many other plants just get bigger and bigger, but you may get greedier and greedier, and you want them. So you dig them up, and you take out your handy soil knife, or something else. This isn't a still bee. I tried to divide it like that, and many plants will divide like that. Either I'm not strong enough, or this root system is a little too much for me, so I'm going to do that instead. Yeah, this is a pretty tough root system. They're all different. If you ever try to divide a perennial, an ornamental grass, you need a chainsaw. So anyway, this is a perfectly wonderful astilbe that's probably bigger than most things that you can buy in a 1-gallon pot at the nursery, and it's yours for free. And the reason that it's such a great time to do it now is because the soil is warm still. There's a steady flow of rain, basically, and also the nights are cool. So this is kind of stressed. I just gave it surgery, and so it's going to settle in really well because of the conditions right now. So divide whatever you want and share or keep. Now, shall we talk about containers? Yes, we should talk about containers. Okay, so I just whipped this up for you this afternoon. I don't know what happened in my childhood, but I just am not overly fond of holiday colors, such as red and orange and that sort of thing. I like cool colors for my fall pots. So a little height, a little thriller, a little filler. There's kind of no spiller, but these violas and pansies will actually grow out and over. Difference between violas and pansies are pansies have the bigger face, but violas, in my experience, are a little better performer. So, you know, these are brand new plants. Picture a million white faces smiling up at you right there, which is going to give good contrast to this little blue, kind of glaucous blue grass I put in, which is a carex. The name of the cultivar is Blue Zinger. But anyway, if you're a person who loves the stacks of pumpkins and the hay bales and all that stuff, you go do that. I just like cool in fall. I don't know why. Another thing that you can do is just keep your summer annuals if they're still looking good until first frost. And a great thing to do there is, okay, so frost comes along and they all look, and you got to pull them out. But it's a little bit, say we have a late frost and it's too late to get good pansies or whatever you want for your pots. Another great thing to do with winter pots is to just have that soil stay there, clear out all the plants, and go cut wonderful evergreens from all over your yard. Magnolias, boxwoods, even the basically maligned Leland cypress is a good one. And then just sort of stick them in as a dried arrangement. And maybe in the center you go with some dried hydrangea heads or the dried flowers off the Miscanthus sinensis, you know, like an ornamental grass. If you bundle 20 of those together and put them in the middle of just boxwoods, I mean, it's a fantastic look. Those greens will stay green for a month or two, depending on where they are in the shade. They'll stay until spring. If they get crispy, you pull them out and start again. Or maybe it's February and the nurseries are starting to have some things that you can put in for winter pots then. Something that wouldn't be exciting to have in a pot in July, such as a little evergreen, might be a great early shopping opportunity. Okay, so that's it for pots. The last topic for today's presentation is to talk about what to do with your plants that you may want to save if they're tender. I generally try to keep it simple in my head, 3 categories. If it's an annual that I know I'm just going to replace next year, off with its head, off to my compost pile. So that's one category. The second category is ones that I think I want for next year, but I'm not going to really give up space in my wonderful porch back there for them. So, for instance, this is an elephant ear. I think it's an alocasia as opposed to a colocasia, but I do get those two confused. It's just gonna look terrible after the first frost, but the tuber kind of corm kind of bulb kind of thing is going to be fine down in there. It looks like concrete, but it's actually just fiberglass. I'm going to carry the whole thing into a space that's sort of like the heating of a garage. It never freezes. And that will just sit, literally, I don't have to do anything to it, and I'll pull it out next spring, and it'll come back. So look for plants that do that. Begonias do that, hostas do that. Lots of things that you have in pots could go into dormancy, and you really don't even have to water some of them. If you're unsure about a particular plant, Google it and see what you can find out. My third category is precious items. This is an agave, and I think it's called Pinpoint, Anyway, I paid more than the videographer would want to know for this plant, and it is a very precious item. So it will come into my porch. I will be paying attention to it weekly, and despite the fact that I'm pretty abominable with indoor plants, it will live. I will make it live. So that's what I do. Oh, by the way, when you're bringing plants indoors, the best way to not bring insects indoors, which is not as cool, is to blast things with water. Blast the pot, blast the plant with water. I mean, don't hurt the plant. But get water off. I mean, you can go for neem oil or something like that, but water is a great first step. And as long as things are pretty clean, if you're lifting it out and you're looking around, maybe that's the time to repot. But as long as things are pretty clean, I mean, we all live with a few bugs anyway that we can't even see. I hope you have enjoyed these videos. I have enjoyed speaking with you. And right after this, we're going to have some question and answer with, and Robin Stafford will be there, my buddy. And we'll see if we can talk to you some more. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Robin. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So good to see you.
Day in Virginia, wasn't it?
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
So gorgeous.
Yeah. So thank you so much to you and Jeff for filming.
Oh, Jeff is a very patient man. Very patient
yes.
man.
I don't know if Jeff is watching today, but anyway, thank you so much to him too. So now for the Q&A section, we received quite a few questions with the registrations, and we'll go ahead and start with those. But if anybody watching with us today has other questions, please enter them in the chat at the bottom of your screen instead of the Q&A. Just enter them in the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. So we're going to start, I think your first clip was on bulbs, and we'll go ahead and start with bulbs. One thing I am kicking myself for after watching this is having planted literally hundreds of bulbs one by one last fall.
Well, you're a very formal person.
No, but who knew I could have just dug a few holes, turned the bags upside down, and dumped them in. Anyway, so you presumably do that in some areas of your garden, yes?
A lot.
Yes.
A lot.
So these are a couple of questions that came in during the thing just about the bulbs. Are you able to tell us the name again of the ones that you mentioned that you did dump out and put into that hole?
Oh yeah, that was, I think, the darkest purple one that they sell, and it's called, is it called Queen of the Night? Is that what I said? I think Queen of the Night. And it's a deep, dark purple. Stealing an idea from an article that I read in one of the many gardening magazines that I get, to match that next spring with the lime green foliage of Dicentra, which is, bleeding heart, but they have that one that's called gold heart. And I love that combination of a really dark color with a chartreuse lime green. So fingers crossed that looks good next spring.
And also the pepper. So what kind of pepper do you use?
Yeah, so we've basically cornered the market. So you might not be able to buy anymore if you go to Amazon. No, I think there's more for people out there, but we found that I was going to Costco and just buying cayenne pepper. And I just got, one of my crew members said, well, can we just try hotter pepper? And so you can find anything on the internet. So sure enough, we these huge things of the hottest pepper that you are so sad if you're using that pepper and it's windy or you accidentally touch your face, but it seems to work. So so in that scenario where I had lifted the dirt up and I had dumped the bag out, and then I would go swoosh with the pepper and then close it down. And then sometimes if you're in a place where it's going to happen, those darn pests, you might put that pepper over the top of the dirt so they're not even tempted to start to dig. You might not have to do this. It just depends on your yard. I don't have to do it in front. I don't get any business up there at all. In the back, I'm very sorry if I don't do it.
Okay. And is that something you would do more than once, or just with the initial planting?
I think I'm only organized enough to do it once. And then, like I said, cross my fingers. Yeah.
Okay. Also on bulbs, somebody wondered, should they be divided in the fall or the spring?
So dividing bulbs is something that not everybody does, because why not just go shopping for more? But if you're a cheap and thrifty gardener like me, thrifty and patient gardener, actually bulbs sometimes ask to be divided. So there's a type of, there's a term for bulbs that the foliage comes up all beautiful, but there's really no flower or very few flowers compared to the original planting. And we call these blind bulbs. So it's like, great, you look wonderful. Where's the darn flower? Well, they're blind. And that is a sign actually, it could be three things. One, they might not be getting enough light. They flowered beautifully because the sun's energy came to them in some faraway farm in the Netherlands or something, and you put them under a tree. So they didn't get any sunlight after that. That could be a problem, that they're not blooming. Another problem could just be that they need to be fed. So bulb tone is a good thing to sprinkle on as they're emerging and as they're dying down. I tend to do that. But the third is that they might simply have become crowded. And so I like to divide in the spring, and the time I like to divide, and I do this with daffodils. I don't bother with tulips. I think of tulips as ephemeral. If they come back, fantastic. But the things that are really supposed to come back are the crocuses and the galanthus, which that snowdrops, and of course daffodils. And so you have a mass of daffodils, you dig it up just like I did, get that shovel way under. You might accidentally slice a few, sorry about that. There's always collateral damage in gardening. And then so you have this hunk and you kind of rip it up, and same thing as dividing perennials. I'd shove, if I liked where it was, I shove half of them or a third of them right back into that hole, and then go dig 2 more new holes, and then a little bulb tone and put it to bed. So I do it at the time when the foliage has already collected most of its energy from the sun, not right after they've bloomed, but right before you really can't see them anymore because your foliage is fading away. I feel like that's the perfect time to do it.
Okay, so with these blind bulbs, you don't necessarily have to give up on them. You could bring them back the
You
next
can
year.
try either dividing, feeding more, or moving to a sunnier location.
Okay, okay. Let's see also about bulbs. When do you plant tulip and crocus bulbs? Somebody thinks seems a little bit early because we're having these warm days, but is it okay to pop them in now?
Okay, it's okay. But it's okay up until here in central Virginia, it's okay to go up until Christmas. And they should tuck in nicely. It's as long as they, just like if you're forcing bulbs, if you get some bulbs that you're not going to plant or that you're going to plant, artificially, you're going to force them, you're going to put them into a pot. They need to be cold. They need to be cold for at least 6 weeks. So whether that's, so really that could be, half of January and February that they could get their cold snap, or you put them in the refrigerator, or you put them in the garage if you're forcing them into pots that you're controlling. So as long as they have that cold snap that tells them to go to bed, then they'll wake up.
Okay. Oh, and speaking of that, just planting bulbs in pots or containers, how often do you water those over the?
Right? Is that the question from that woman?
That actually is a question from your dear daughter, Tyler.
Daughter, class of 11, go Whoos. Hi, Ty. So she and I talked about that yesterday, and there's so much information on the web, and I find, if you saw my Instagram tip today on orchids, it's yet another way to torture orchids. Let's see if this works. And I feel the same way about most things about gardening. I just like fiddling around. So one of the most successful bulb plantings I had was a jillion just different bulbs all in a huge pot. And they all, first came the snowdrops, then came the crocus, then came the squill, then came the tulips and the dafts. It was really, I think I might have thrown a couple of alliums at the very bottom. It was really fun. But she had read that it was good to stay with one type per bulb. And wiser people than I might think that that's the best way. So I like to fiddle around. I would go with the party in there. The arrangements that you see of bulbs in pots as they grow, they do look awfully stunning with that single, big blob of, gorgeous pink per pot. But, you do whatever you want to do. And it's very simple. You're going to give them a place to put their roots down, because you buy something that's just this cute little, golf ball thing. But of course, you've all seen it when it does grow a fairly extensive network of roots. And so they need their space underneath them. So it's got to be a fairly deep pot. Although the roots, I have done that in too shallow a pot, and the roots somehow find their way curling up to the top. They'll find the soil, those roots will. And so up they come. You plant them, you put them in the garage. You definitely cannot ignore them. They don't want, you would, depending on the humidity level of your garage. I mean, if you have a damp basement, you might not have to water too much. But if I were you and you were doing this, I would tell Siri, or put it on the calendar to tell you about once every 3 weeks to go stick your finger in and see, oh, I think they need a little moisture. This is dusty dry, but not too much, because they can rot. So that happy medium.
Okay. People are very interested in this pepper question. Things are coming in the chat now about the pepper. So just quantities. I mean, do you put a cup of pepper, take it out with you, and
very scientific.
Okay. No, what are you? Is it a little sprinkle, or is it really?
So I kept those old, what I buy now isn't such a big container, but I kept those old Costco, picture a Costco cayenne pepper, a black pepper, and you can open up the one side of it and it can dump the pepper into your chili pot, or the one with little holes where it can sprinkle. So I just go poof, poof. I just cover them. I pretend like I'm a squirrel. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of pepper. I don't want that. I would think a few shakes would do it. I don't know.
Okay. I think that's probably answered it. Thank you. Okay, why don't we move on to perennials? Or actually, we've had a ton of questions about dahlias.
Oh yeah.
That are still with us now. So people are thinking about it. And so wondering if they need to be wintered out of the ground in Virginia. in this
Where we
zone?
live here in Charlottesville, I was very pleased because, I gardened for many, many years in Connecticut, and I was like, ugh, time to lift the dahlias. And then I finally struck upon a way to keep them without making them either bone dry or soggy messes so you pack them up, this time of year in Connecticut, and then you have to figure out how to do it so that you haven't given them like the bulbs, too much moisture or too little moisture. And I've done both. I prefer to get them to have them too dry. Then you're just dealing with rocks as opposed to really smelly mush. But here in Virginia, you may leave them. And if we have a particularly rough winter, then you go shopping in spring because it hasn't worked. But I do leave them myself. I leave myself a nice tall stalk to remind me not to plant anything else there. And I probably mulch it up a little higher than some other things. Some things don't like mulch. Boxwoods don't like mulch an awful lot. Peonies, they'll be fine over winter with a regular layer, but they and irises don't like a lot of mulch. But I mulch up those dahlias and some other semi-tender things for us fairly tall. And yeah, they should be able to stay. It's worth a try unless you love to dig things out of the ground.
Okay. Yeah, and should they be, let's see, separated? I mean, do you ever
so you can, yeah, you can go shopping at home, and I would hop on, it's such a visual thing. I would hop on YouTube and throw that into the search there, and somebody's going to show you with a sharp knife where the eyes are and how to divide them. So you don't have to, but it's absolutely a great way to share with yourself or with others.
Okay. And speaking of just the dividing, now switching to hellebores, wondering when hellebores, she called them Lenten roses, but when can they be divided?
Anytime now. We're doing a lot of that now because, I just think they are one of the best plants going. What else flowers for that long? What else flowers at that time of year? What else looks neat all summer long as just this green blob, which isn't actually, it's not thrilling, but it's not disinteresting. It's got great structure, the foliage of a hellebore. And so it's a great time to do it right now. And the leaves will let you know that they were a little sad that you did that, but they'll be back. Oh, I have a great tip about hellebores that I didn't know. So I like to keep my hellebore foliage around at this time of year and going forward because, I start to cut other things back and that looks great and neat and green. But I was talking to a guy who raised them, and he also raised a lot of, so he's a nurseryman, and he also does a lot of tiny cyclamen. And he was dealing, so he's raising woodland plants for a living. And so he's propagating them in a deciduous forest, and he's got a zillion leaves to deal with. And finally, one year, he just took about 1/10 of his stock and he cut back all hellebore leaves in fall. And he said it was a gorgeous thing because it didn't get caught up with the fall leaves coming down. He could see what he was doing, to do his business more efficiently. But if you like a neat, clean look in winter, go ahead and do that. Then everything that comes up in spring and starting probably in January for a lot of those early ones is just beautiful, fresh. You don't have to decide, oh, this is a little tatty from last year, I'll cut it back. You just cut everything back and you get fresh new growth in January. I tried it on a couple, it's fun.
That's awesome. It's good to know. Let's see, and how about planting, if people want to plant new perennials in the fall, how late can that be done safely?
So here, I'd go definitely into the first week or two in December, unless we have some terrible, cold snap. So it's the soil is still much warmer than the air. And so I think that's doable. And some of the things that you'll be planting, for instance, that dicentra, that's bleeding heart that I was just talking to, you'll only be planting a root system anyway. Those are gone. The foliage is all gone because that's what they do at this time of year. So it could take, I would say reasonably up till Thanksgiving, Christmas, if you want to push the season a little bit.
Okay. And is that true too for transplanting perennials and shrubs? Same kind of timetable?
Yeah. If it's something really precious that you don't want to take a chance on, then maybe you let it sleep until spring. But most plants are really tough.
Okay. Let's see. Hydrangeas. So many hydrangea questions.
I know. So you and I were talking about this and you're like, okay, we got a lot of hydrangea questions. So if I start telling you guys the rules about hydrangeas, you're going to be like, oh God, isn't it time for a cocktail? I'm out of here. So I'm not going to tell you the rules of hydrangeas, but I am going to refer you, and I think that somebody's going to put it up so you can see it, to
Yes.
a blog post. And I made this blog post 2 or 3 years ago. So my hair's shorter, and it's pretty good, except for 2 things that you should be aware of. I think it's a series of videos that I put on Instagram, and I talk intelligently about the macrophylla hydrangeas, which are the ones that you do need to be careful of. And then I think in the second video, I refer to paniculata, which are the panicle-shaped flowers. And then I go on to talk about so I'm referring to a paniculata, but I'm actually talking about an arborescens, which is the third type. Arborescens has the same pruning rules as the paniculata, so no harm done, but I'm actually referring to one of my favorite plants, a native called Annabelle, and it can be pruned down to nothing, just like paniculatas can be. The other thing that's wrong with those videos is that it's cold and I'm sniffling a lot. And so for that, if you go to watch, I apologize beforehand.
How about irises? How do you cut back all of the foliage, and then when do you divide?
They'll tell you that's a great one that says, hey, hey, see this big hole in the center? You need to divide me. So literally, it's if you start getting bare spots in your patch of irises, that's when it's just petering out in the middle, and so it's a great time to divide it, unless you like the shape of a donut with your perennials, which is your prerogative. So it's a great time to dig them up and throw them around, give them to friends. In terms of the foliage, I love the glaucous blue-green accent of a German iris, a bearded iris in my garden, whether it's blooming or not. But I have become a bit of a snob about my bearded irises, because did you know, Robin, that they have all kinds of ones that are repeat bloomers? And so you get the incongruous look of a stand of iris like now. And so it's like, what the hell? But then you're so happy, because even if it doesn't strike your fancy, that's not a fall flower, that is offending my sensibilities, you can cut them all and bring them inside. So I try to have only those in my garden, and I absolutely love the foliage. I think it's a really good vertical accent. So I leave it as long as it looks good.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody asked, what is the name of the blue bulb that you mentioned with the summer snowflake?
Oh, right. Yes. So Camassia. So Camassia. Yeah, that's right. And it's a good one. And I think I said that both of those were 14 inches tall. And then I was watching it later. I'm like, yeah, they're kind of taller than that, like 16 inches. They're nice tall ones.
Okay. Ashley, are you able to drop that into the chat, that spelling? CAMASSIA.
CAMASSIA. And the other
Okay.
one that I talk about, Ashley, if you want to jot this one down, is leucojum. So that's LEUCOJUM. And it has those 2 common names that I would go with leucojum.
Okay. Let's see, we've done the hydrangeas. Okay, how about figs? There were quite a few questions about figs.
So many figs.
So
One
many
was a really
figs.
general question. I remember saying, how do I protect my fig? And I'm like, from whom would you like to protect it? If I come too close with my glass of Chardonnay, am I going to take too many? So young figs in this area, so where we live, they actually do want a bit of protection. They are a little bit of a borderline. They're first of all, our world is unfortunately getting a little bit warmer. Secondly, they're coming out with these cultivars that can bear with a little bit of colder weather. But like a camellia around here, a protected place is always a little bit of a better bet, in a corner someplace or near a house. And if you want to protect it from deer, that might be netting. If it's out in the open, if you want to protect it from ladies with glasses of Chardonnay, I don't know what you do. I don't know too much about them, except I do know that they can be pruned so that they don't have to take over your yard. They can even be espaliate. You can really prune them pretty hard. So hop on YouTube or Google to find out what to do. But I've had people say, well, I love my fig, but now I can't see my porch or my car, they can become huge. So don't be afraid to prune. You'll still get quite a nice harvest, I'm sure, over the years.
Okay, and then somebody says she has an abundance of figs on her fig tree, but they're all still green and not much time left.
I remember reading
Do you
that.
know anything about?
An educated guess would only be that perhaps it doesn't have enough sun.
Okay.
But I can't think of what else it might be.
Okay. I'm going to hop on this question that just came in about poppies. I love poppies. It says let's see, Oriental poppies got crowded out. And do you have any tips for, let's see, any tips for reestablishing by seed and keeping them from getting crowded out again?
What I know about poppies is that, and it's mostly from listening to people in England. I think I mentioned on the last one that my favorite podcast is the BBC Gardener's Question Time. They talk about poppies all the time. I haven't had much luck growing poppies, but I do know that they are prolific self-seeders and that they will, if they flower for you once, that you should harvest that seed and encourage it. And that's one of those plants. And I wish I could roll off more of the tip of my tongue. Anyway, it's one of those plants that their seed can like sit in the snow and come good next spring. So maybe just try with a few plants that you buy at a nursery and make sure that you let a few go to seed, because I think that I'm pretty sure the seed is the key to a happy population.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question about aches and pains in the garden after several hours of digging and planting bulbs and moving plants and weeds. Do you have any tips or helpful tools that make body bending work easier?
Yeah, well, tips, I would say that my gardening world became so much easier when my daughter dragged me down to a yoga class, and I could still have been in my 30s, but yeah. Anyway, core strength is incredibly important. And I just, if you, the person who asked this question, if you do yoga or sit-ups or Pilates or something, and you're still having aches and pains, then that's different. But that's a really good start if you haven't done any of those things, because it just seems to solve every little problem. But anything that you do on your hands and knees could be done with a long handled tool. Weeding, for example, I mean, you could just, they have like the stirrup hose, the ones that are literally shaped like a stirrup, that you could do without getting down on your hands and knees. You might have to do it more often, but at least it's still pleasurable and you're getting exercise outside. And I would say that if you have aches and pains, you might be dealing with old age like we are. Well, not so much you, Robin, but anyway, in that case, maybe your eyesight isn't as good. And so maybe you don't have to worry about too many of the details of gardening, because who can see all those weeds anyway, right?
Okay, we've had a bunch of questions too about mulch and whether you are spreading mulch in the fall. Do you wait till the spring? And what your preferred mulch is for perennial beds?
Yeah, I love mulch. So the 4 reasons to use mulch are that the mulch will, do some weed reduction because it covers up, not all, but it can help you with weed seeds. It'll make your soil maintain its moisture much better. So it'll help you with watering chores, and it feeds the soil as it breaks down. And the 4th one is that it looks fantastic. I love, in a formal garden, I would love my premium good look for a formality and neatness is a double shredded hardwood bark. I mean, I suppose if you really wanted to get neat, you could go with like a compost product, which is just black. But when you use compost as mulch, the good news is that it breaks down faster and feeds the soil. The bad news is that it breaks down faster and you have to go do it again pretty soon. A hardwood bark mulch will last you probably for a year, and a good layer of mulch is about 2 or 3 inches. When somebody mulches, or when you mulch your garden, remember that woody plants of any type, trees, roses, even like Caryopteris or, butterfly bushes, or even the woody salvias, they don't like mulch touching them. So scoot it off. And those 2 types of perennials that I talked about not liking mulch are irises, and they like their tubers to be sitting out in the sun, and peonies, which like to be about 1 inch above. So they don't like a thick layer of mulch. I use in my garden sometimes, depending on people who are coming through, sometimes people come through the garden, I'll use that double shredded hardwood bark for a really neat look. I'll use my own compost, which is not a neat look, but it's excellent stuff. It has sticks in it and all that kind of thing. But the thing that I use the most is my own fallen leaves. I just let them fall. And if I were a really, really disciplined, messy gardener, letting those insects live there all the time, I would never do anything with those leaves. But I kind of like to see my plants. So over the winter, as I said, I think in the video, I'll go back and kind of scruffy up those leaves so that they're not so big, or maybe pull them off a bed, throw them in my mower, and put them back on. Unfortunately, I've done away with quite a few insects at that stage, haven't I? So maybe I try not to do that, except if maybe there's a tour coming to my garden, which is, oh, next spring. So I was talking to a group a couple of weeks ago, and I said, and I was talking about mulch, and I said, so if you guys come to visit my garden next April for Historic Garden Week, you will know how big of a coward I was or how brave I was about just letting those leaves stay, or like, no, this is too messy. I have to clean it up and put down real mulch.
And about the, I mean, you touched on the insect habitats in one of your clips, but do you have anything more to say about that? We did have a few questions come in about that.
It's an incredibly important thing to do. And I have changed my gardening techniques so much over the years because of that. As I said, I'm a little bit distracted, and I hope not too much so, thinking about people walking through my garden next April and wanting it to be neat for them. But I know that as soon as that's over with, I'm going to start after that, I'm going to really start to let things go, because every little thing that you leave, every leaf, every hollow stem of a perennial that's gone by is a place for an insect to be. And it's just so important. I mean, they are the little guys that run the world. And I don't know if you all are familiar with an author and speaker named Doug Tallamy. He wrote 2 books, but the latest one, I'm going to hold this up. It's not the book, it's the book cover. Doug Tallamy, and it's Nature's, what is it called? Nature's Best Hope. Okay, so true confessions, I have not read this book, but I have listened to Doug Tallamy speak on it. I have listened to podcasts about it. And it's got the cool idea of just all of us leaving a little bit of a portion, or maybe a lot of a portion of our yards wild for habitat. And all of our suburban, or in your case, you know, you live out on a big piece of land, those can become a patchwork of like a national forest in the United States of America. Nobody's paying for it. In fact, you're doing less work. You're letting it go so that these insects in this ring of ecology, starting with bugs, some of them who will eat your vegetation, but that's a good thing. They're eating. And then drawing in the birds, and then the other things. I mean, I'd like to draw the line at bears, and I do live next to a mountain, but I'm good with foxes. Foxes come along and eat my bunnies and eat my moles and foals. So anything that you can leave is really, really good. And I'm going to do my best to leave more and more.
Okay. How about compost? How should you care for your compost heap during the winter months?
Oh, just let it sit. That's what it loves, to just sit. Add to it. If you're finding like, oh my gosh, I'm adding to it and all the good stuff that I want to get to is at the bottom of it, start another one. And so you let one sleep and you're adding to the other. In 2 parts of my yard, I have 3. So one's the add-on bit, one's the middle sort of sleeping that I'll flip on down to the, oh, and now this is really good stuff. I'm going to use it. And I spread it. As I said, I use it as mulch. I spread it on my beds.
Okay. How about, do you ever use pine needles for mulch?
I don't. And I've seen that as a good look. Very difficult to hit a golf ball out of that stuff. Have you ever tried? Discouraging. Anyway, I don't play a lot of golf, but that is my biggest memory. I've heard people say, and this might be urban legend because snakes can be anywhere, that snakes like it. I feel like it's a real good Southern look. And I having lived in Connecticut for too many years, I don't feel like that would be my choice. It breaks down slower, but it still does break down, and it feeds the soil. It would be just like leaves. It would lend the soil a tinge of acidity, so get your soil more ericaceous, but most garden plants like that slightly acid soil anyway.
Okay. We've gotten a few questions about pests, including deer. But rabbits, voles, moles, deer, can you just address some of our little
Yeah, so depressing. Okay, yeah, well, so deer build a fence, or if you can't build a fence, that go to, I think I said this last spring, there are so many beautiful flowering plants that deer just won't eat unless they're really stupid, because they're actually, we saw a few bites out of peonies this summer. We're like, what? And you just picture that, like, you know, teenage boy doofus deer saying, Mom, is this good for me? No, don't eat that. God, you're not supposed to eat that stuff. So they don't eat peonies. They don't eat sages. They don't eat Russian sage. They don't eat hellebores. They don't eat boxwoods. And if you want a complete list of things, or you're like, I wonder how deer like this. There was that question about chrysanthemums. Do deer eat chrysanthemums? Yes, they do. They wouldn't be as juicy as hostas, but yes, they do. If you were to Google Rutgers deer resistant. So Rutgers University, they have a great database, and you can feed your plant name into that database and see how risky it is. Moles and voles, terrible creatures, awful. We've tried, hiring people to come with these little smoke bombs that don't seem to do anything. I was sticking juicy fruit gum down holes because of when we spoke last spring, somebody suggested that to me either through this platform or on Instagram. I can't remember. That just felt weird. I don't want, I don't like juicy fruit gum. I stopped. I don't know if that worked. And mothballs might work. I feel like mine might be moving on, and I don't know why. And I'm just gonna I'm not a religious person. I'm just happy that they have. So that's moles and voles. And what was the last one? Rabbits.
Rabbits, yeah.
So they're in my yard. I mean, I planted out, Robin, all these beautiful cabbages and lettuces, like a half a dozen of each one in neat little rows. They're gone, except, oh, here's some good news. They don't seem to like arugula. Hey, and I do. My technique is that if I see one, I drop everything and start running, and I'm probably going to hurt myself badly. I pick up a trug or a shovel or maybe my soil knife, and I throw it at the rabbit. I scream. So it's really quite alarming. And my hope is, and I have no scientific basis to think that this could work, but just if they feel like, wow, I've accidentally moved into the home of a crazy person, then maybe they'll move to another home. It doesn't seem to work, but that's what I do because I'm so angry when I see them. Pathetic.
Let's see, how about pruning? So somebody asked about tree peonies, but also questions about azaleas, boxwood, camellias.
Yeah, good.
These things we should deal with now, or?
Great question. It's not a wonderful time to prune. So when you prune a plant, it tells the plant, oh, I better set out some new growth. And so a few snips here and there, you go to your boxwood and you make your wreath. That's not going to hurt it. But a major pruning on a plant should not be done basically starting around here in early October up until the plant is dormant, say in January, and then you can hack away. Basic rule of thumb for any plant that you want to give a major rejuvenation pruning to is about a third of the plant. It should be able to survive that. I have gone way more than a third on plants that I wasn't sure I really wanted to survive that surgery, and darn it all, they did, but that's okay. They showed me they wanted to play my little game. So the camellias that are blooming now, the fall blooming camellias, are the Sasanqua type. And so of course, you just let them have their show. You of course don't want to prune the winter blooming types because you'd be pruning off next year's flowers. But just a note about pruning off next year's flowers, and that has to do with the hydrangeas. Maybe you'll go and listen to me talk on and on about hydrangeas. Spring blooming plants such as azaleas, deutzias, hydrangeas, the camellia in winter. It's okay to prune a little bit before they bloom. For instance, I go over each of my azaleas every winter. And what I take away is the crowded branches in the middle and the low branches. So those flowers I would never see anyway. And I want to lift the skirt, and I want a beautiful form to look at. And I don't want like a mess growing around along the ground. I like to plant other things under the ground because I only have less than a half an acre here. So I'm very jealous of azalea, you have your spot up here. I need to put other things underneath you. So it's okay to prune a little bit now, but the really great time to prune is on a warm winter day, and you can really go at it.
Okay, so at the end of the kind of dormancy.
Yeah, winter
okay.
to early spring, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, now overwintering. People wondering about raised gardens.
So I've never done a raised bed. So there you go.
Okay.
How ignorant am I? I would assume that you would probably keep it in your head. If it's a raised veggie bed, then I think it's time to, if you haven't started your winter vegetables, then it's a great time to do that. So what's a good winter vegetable? All the root ones that are not hanging out in the snow, the turnips and the, not potatoes, I don't think. I'm really bad at vegetables. Can you tell? Carrots. But if you have a few packets of lettuces and that kind of thing, sow them now, and they won't have time to mature like into big things, but you'll have, what do you call those? Like microgreens, and you can go make yourself a microgreen salad. If you're growing precious plants that you really want to survive, so I would, say it's in a raised bed. seems to me that it's almost as protected as the ground, but not quite. Let's put it in the category of a plant that's in a container over winter. Many of them do survive. Okay, so say you have a boxwood in a container. Well, why wouldn't a boxwood survive in a container? It survives in the ground, and that's the same sort of thing, same temperatures. The stress of, so once a boxwood or any plant that's in the ground gets to settle in for the winter, and it's like it's got its blanket on, and you have that 60-degree Virginia day, and it's like, okay, but my roots can't feel that because the ground is still frozen. So it's in bed. Whereas a plant, that same boxwood in a pot, which is in the sun, would be like, oh, am I supposed to wake up? Because it's 60 and there's this much plastic or terracotta separating me from that 60 degrees. Maybe I should wake up. So it goes through the stresses of the waking up and going to sleep, and cold and warm and cold and warm. So if you have precious plants in your raised bed and you're wondering whether they can survive, I would do the simple trick of just lifting them out and healing them in and putting them really to bed if you're worried that they might go through the stress of freeze thaw.
Okay. How about sowing seeds in the fall and the winter? And somebody's also asking about just kind of starting a meadow.
Meadow.
Yes. So can that happen in the fall?
Yeah, it could happen. I think that one of the pretty limited knowledge on that, but I would really encourage everybody who could spare a little bit of lawn. I'm married to somebody I love very much, and he loves his lawn. So we're not, well, he's given up a lot of his lawn to gardening, but we're not doing a meadow here. But if you have a nice big lawn, maybe you could just let it, first of all, just stop mowing. And then, hop online and find somebody who knows more than I do about what you could do to, so those grasses are going to grow up, and maybe you naturally have some dandelions or violets or some really nice things in there, but you could sow some zinnias or some grasses and make yourself a little meadowette. And there's a lot of information about that out there. So I suggest you do your own research. But wait, was there a meadow? And then there was something else that you asked me about.
Just about, and then sowing seeds in general in the
Right.
fall and winter.
So again, so you've got your package of zinnia seeds. It will say, wait until spring. You've got a package of, say, larkspur or delphinium or, more hardy perennials, and you can actually sow them now and just see if they come up. Lots of seeds will make it through the winter around here. So I get all kinds of things. I don't buy many packages of seeds, but because I grow Verbena bonariensis, zinnias, cleome, what else just comes up willy-nilly in my garden? I can't think of the name of it. Flowers just come, and they come from my compost pile, and those seeds, I haven't cared for them at all. Compost is a great way to have volunteers in your garden. If you don't like to pull up things that you didn't expect, then maybe that's not a good way for you, but I just love the surprise of what might come up. There are seeds that can be sown in fall, and I would just suggest what you're interested in, just do some research and find out if it's a good one for our region.
Okay, and back to the compost for a second. Do you put food scraps in your compost?
I do, but not directly, because I'm in my compost, I'm physically on there, and I really don't like to stand on banana peels. So I have one of those tumblers. So from the kitchen, I have a airtight container full of things that you could recognize as, last week's breakfast. And that goes into the tumbler, and that spins around and becomes this horrible anaerobic smelly mess. I could work on that and make it so it has too much nitrogen and not enough carbon, but I don't care really. I'm just going to choose one day when I really need a shower anyway and take that mess and put it into, like, dig a depression into my real compost pile and just cover it up. So I'll never, except for that day when I'm shifting it, I'll never have to deal with the muck. And by the time it mixes all in with, every weed that I've pulled, every zinnia that I've deadheaded, every, leaf, or I leave my leaves, but any organic debris, it's all mixed up in the end. And so, yeah, it absolutely adds to it. I do occasionally see eggshells, although eggshells are great. And when I cook my eggs, I ball the eggshells up in a paper towel because they really take forever to break down. But I still see them, but they've been crunched up a lot, so I don't mind. It's kind of fun.
Here's a little change. Let's see. Oh, okay. What about composting weeds or turning them under?
Yeah, so I compost everything, including weeds, and my compost I know doesn't get hot enough to kill every seed. The way I plant my gardens is just plant, 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 plant. There's very few, there's just not a lot of room for weeds. And like I said, some of those things still come anyway, unwanted weeds and very much wanted weeds. A weed is a plant in the wrong place or a volunteer. You know, I have lots of things that come up that I didn't plant, but I do want them. So yeah, unless you live, most people tuck their compost piles like in the shade. We don't want to see compost piles. So very few people have the luxury of putting that compost pile in full sun, and it probably doesn't get hot enough to kill those seeds. Well, that's great with me because we've talked about the seeds that I like to make it through my process. So absolutely, you know, I throw everything in there.
Okay. See how I can segue into this question. It's blueberries. What's the best time to dig up and replant a blueberry bush?
I would say now. And blueberries are so awesome. I haven't had very good luck myself, but I've seen quite a few on other people's properties. And I mean, they are the color of a blueberry, the blueberry foliage right now, it's like one of the best plants there is. Plus they give you cute little white flowers in spring. Plus they give you fruit in summer. If you can get to the fruit before the birds eat it, it's a really good plant. Don't forget that if it's just one and you haven't had a good harvest, you probably want another type or two to help cross-pollinate.
Okay. And this is another fruit tree question. How do you keep potted citrus trees alive in the winter? Do you become the human bee and use a Q-tip to cross-pollinate?
Ooh, that sounds very ambitious. I'm sure a better gardener than I would do that. However, I'm pretty sure that mine, so I let mine rest. I bring it inside, I put it in a sunny, cold window, and I don't actually bring it in until I absolutely need to. They're borderline hardy. I don't take it out of the pot. I should probably do that. Probably the root system is ridiculous at this stage. So bring it into the garage, let it have some light, let it have a little water, but basically not challenge it to grow during the winter. Just say, okay, you just hang out and don't die. And then as soon as you can, as soon as the temperatures indicate it, then you pull it out in spring. And I would let the bees instead of the Q-tip do the pollination, but that's just me.
How about just one more compost question, I promise.
I love compost.
I know, it's great. Do you chop debris smaller to put into compost, or do you leave it large and long?
So that's a great question. I now have a fire pit because that is the only way I will see my friends, right? Doesn't everybody have a fire pit? Cheers. That's the only way we're going to socialize all winter. So I put a lot of sticks in my fire pit now, which is great because it makes my compost less sticky and more attractive to my eye. But there's that. So if you go, say you go prune an azalea and you have sticks, but you're not going to burn those because they're too alive. I either, if I'm in the mood to chop, chop, chop with my wonderful Okatsune hand pruners, which I love so much, I'll make them small. And my rule of thumb is basically anything smaller than a pencil can go into my compost pile. But I'll build a brush pile, and I would love to keep that brush pile on my property. And I have plans again to do so possibly after this tour next spring, to just pile it up. It's fantastic habitat for birds and creatures to just let it be. And so it's not compost I can use, although maybe in 10 years, but who knows, I'll be dead or moved or something then. But in the meantime, it's just going to break down very, very slowly, and it'll be a great habitat for animals. Oh, back to the compost. I think the second part of that question, the earlier question, which I did not address, was, do I flip mine? Mm-hmm. And you've seen, Robin, that I don't, well, I do flip that. Yeah, I do flip that one section because I have gravity. I have three compartments on a hillside, and I physically do flip those three. But I have other stations of compost, either 2 or 3 compost piles in my yard, where I simply have the adding one, or that's where I'm putting my stuff, and the sitting, sleeping, waiting one. And I don't flip those. So if I were to get compost out of the sleeping one and what's on top isn't quite ready yet, I'll just say, okay, you go back to the adding one and I'll dig under you to get the good stuff.
Okay. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour, but I do have a question somebody asked if you could just tell your biggest gardening success and any gardening failure you want to share with
Oh, failures
us.
all the time. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, you should, because it'll make you feel better. So many failures. Oh my gosh. Did you remember that magnolia that I dug up and I was going to put it as an espalier? Did you see
Yes,
that?
yes. And you put that was on Instagram, I think.
Yeah,
You
and it
showed
looked
how to espalier.
Yeah, it looked beautiful that day. And I was so excited. That thing is DED. But I'm not going to dig it up until I'm sure I'm watering it and talking to it. It is the crispiest looking magnolia you have ever seen. A shopping opportunity. A failure is often a shopping opportunity in gardening. I would say one of the biggest, the biggest success. Oh, I know I can't. It's like Jeff would say about our children who were wonderful. And if you got compliments on, if we got compliments on our children, and still are wonderful, but you know, as small children or traveling with them, oh, your children are so well behaved. And he would always say, well, thank you so much, but I'm not going to take the credit for that, because if they weren't, I would not take the blame. And I feel like that with gardening. I'm going to do well at gardening because it's what I want to do so well. Ginny.
No, I was going to say, I hear Ginny. Is it time for her to make a little appearance?
Come here, Ginny.
Yeah.
Now we'll see. Come.
That was actually perfect timing.
Ginny, come. She can't.
I'd also like to just put in a plug for your spring garden program, because there you really, you give the full tour of the garden, and definitely some of your successes are so apparent in that.
It's a fun garden.
Some of the water and
that, yeah, the water feature, but I didn't do that. I thought of that fire pit area. I really like that. I'm gonna have successes because even if I'm batting, 150, I'm at this so often, things are going to be good. It just makes me very, very happy.
Right. That's great. Do you want to does Ginny want to hop up for a little?
Yeah. Do you mind if I get her?
No, of course. Yeah. We've been waiting.
Come here.
And let's see, Ashley just put the link to Leslie's Instagram in the chat, and also for the spring garden program. And here's Ginny, the lovely Springer.
She's like, but what about dinner? I did feed her because I knew this would happen.
So cute.
Really
great. Well, thank you, Leslie, so much. So much fun. Maybe we'll lure you back here in the spring again. We'll see.
You can't shut me up.
No, I know. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And we will send a link to today's program and also to the spring program again. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Take care. Bye, Leslie.
Bye, Robin.
Bye.